Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and Donald Trump is reveling in the ability to say that 50 different countries are wearing out his phone lines begging for new trade deals as a result of his trade war. But there are other players in the game, and there is another option for some countries as well. So, an alliance of markets committed to the rules-based order could cut the rug from underneath Trump's feet. And it's not just that such an alliance is possible, we're getting the strongest possible indication that major economies are actively pursuing it. And if it works, could be game over for Trump's little gambit. But first, for daily news and commentary, please hit the subscribe button to stay notified. So stock markets around the world continue to fall as investors come to terms with the fact that Trump's tariffs being crazy is no barrier to him carrying on with them. But Canada has a general election this month. Now, this election could actually be a major factor in how this global trade war plays out. If the Liberal Party win, as seems likely now, and Mark Carney remains Prime Minister, there's a good chance we're going to see something quite interesting happening, and it could be stunningly bad news for Donald Trump. Various leaders, including Starmer, Macron, Carney and others, have been actively talking to one another about how to approach Trump's protectionist extortion gambit. There's no secret about that. The question is, what are they saying? Well, Trump wants countries to come to him one by one and agree to much worse trading terms than they were previously on in return for maybe some sort of reduction or exemption on tariffs, which will work massively in America's favour. Indeed, we know that several countries have dropped everything to rush to talks with Trump and his people. The White House is boasting that about 50 governments have done so, which is exactly what Trump wants. But it is not what individual governments want. Now, some may have no choice. Many may have no choice. Retaliatory tariffs, not an option for almost every country. China has hit back. China's got the capacity to hit back much harder, in fact. It has the power to do so. Canada has responded as well. The EU is looking at options. But almost everyone else, absolutely no point. If Trump is serious about having to accept short-term pain for long-term gain, and he genuinely seems to believe what he is saying about the way trade works, then retaliatory tariffs are not going to work. But there might be another option, an alliance of countries committed to the rules-based trading system. On Saturday's stream, I showed how the combined economies of Canada, the UK, Australia, Japan and the EU pull slightly ahead of America's economy. And they all have quite large volumes of trade with America as well. America has by far and away the biggest single economy, so it can pick others off one by one. But if some band together, it could be a different matter. To begin with, obviously, you are going to need to include countries which not only have large individual economies, as well as lots of trade with America, but also ones who are already used to cooperating with one another. So a sort of alliance like this, it could easily be expanded to include others once it proves itself. It is likely that the markets I mentioned, who already trade with one another, are broadly aligned on being in favour of a rules-based system, not the law of might is right, and they do not want to acquiesce to Trump's extortion. If they can come together, their combined economies are slightly greater than America's. Now, they can't coordinate quite like America can. America has a single leader, especially as Congress has abdicated its responsibilities. You know, this, what you might call the Rebel Alliance, will each have their own national interests and slightly different requirements to protect, but the motivation to work together will surely be immense. The alternative would be succumbing to global recession and allowing Trump to pick them off one by one, as he is attempting to do with the smaller economies clambering to talk turkey with him. And if this alliance does form, and they open up trade channels between themselves, what you have is a trading network which rivals America, with the added bonus that it hasn't frozen out the rest of the world as well. Could be game over for Trump, couldn't it? Now, I don't know how easy it would be, but if these countries have a way of mitigating the damage, even to the point of avoiding deep recessions themselves, and America sinks into a depression, as the only countries willing to deal are those with relatively small levels of trade, then Trump is sunk. You know, there's certainly talk that if Carney wins the Canadian election, he wants to be a big driver of this alliance. And that's why I say the Canadian election could be crucial. Carney is the one who's really pushing this. He would be very well placed to lead on it. Because this is how it works. And the Canadian government, as I say, have talked about this. It's not speculation. Canada works on closer trade ties with the EU. Also the UK, but in this particular case, the EU. It's not joining the EU. It's not joining the single market. It's a closer trading relationship. This is also what the UK wants. Labour wanted this before, but it becomes way less controversial when faced against the threat of Trump. Plus, doing it with Canada, a fellow Commonwealth member, means it all seems less ideological to the public, because nobody's going to accuse Canada of wanting to join the EU. So if we do the same as Canada, the Brexit, this is reversing Brexit by the back door. It's like, well, no, we're just doing what Canada's doing, right? Less controversial. Controversy is what Labour are actively trying to avoid when it comes to Brexit, right? If we can't break into the American market, we must enhance our access to the European market. But it would also mean Canada and the UK enjoying closer trade with one another as well. Something, again, Carney has talked about wanting. Remember, our post-Brexit trade talks broke down over cheese. So there is scope. And if we can work on, a different arrangement, one that is in the interests of both parties in this post-Trump world, then we can get better trade with both the EU and Canada all in the same move. And it doesn't just have to be Atlantic trade. Australia, Japan, New Zealand, some other willing countries perhaps. Though some of the old sticking points, with Canada may change anyway. I noticed Starmer's already extended the deadline for hybrids. He's doing a couple of other things as well. He was really loath to extend that deadline on hybrids, but times change. Anyone who feels comfortable, any country that feels comfortable dealing with the EU, which would be the main market at the centre of this network, and feeling the pinch from Trump's tariffs, which everyone will be, could get involved. It could really grow into something quite interesting. In adversity, we find unity. China could well do something similar with countries more comfortable dealing with them. Or, if this new trading network can prove resilient to Trump, China could just well join with us. We're not talking about a free trade area, right? We're just talking about keeping trade barriers with one another as low as possible to cut America out where we can. Then imagine what would happen in America itself. So Trump will be whining like a bitch because his plan is only working on minnows. His oligarchs will be whining like bitches because Trump has trashed their companies and they're losing out in foreign markets who have banded together. Republicans will be whining like bitches because their economy is going to shit, and even with planned voter suppression, they could still get killed in the midterms. Right now, Trump is behaving like a mafia don, the undisputed patriarch of the Republicans. But if he's not feeding their greed and he loses his power, even of fear over them, threatening their primaries, what's the point of threatening your primary if you think you're going to lose anyway? Will he then remain in control? His plan is already sort of falling apart at the seams. His own secretaries of state are coming out with contradictory lines about the tariff plan, exposing the fact they don't even know what the story is themselves. Like even an 8-year-old, a naughty 8-year-old knows to get the story straight with their pal before facing the inquisition from the teacher. I suppose the problem with billionaires is they're not used to facing challenges to their statements until they suddenly decide that holding public office is a good idea. As for the situation in the UK, the Tories and Reform UK will inevitably argue that we should be tilting closer to Trump. In fact, they're already doing so. Not these other countries and certainly not the EU. But what for? For slightly lower tariffs? Remember, Trump is not offering anything which is better trade terms than we had under Biden. It's quite clear from what Trump is suggesting that it's not a case of trade deal and then I'll eliminate the tariffs. It's trade deal and maybe I'll reduce some of them. So whatever we can agree, and it's looking increasingly likely we'll struggle, whatever we could possibly agree is still worse trading terms with America than we had under Biden. Trump is offering us a choice between worse terms or much worse terms. And what's more, I think the public are understanding that. And with the speech which Starmer intends to make this week, I'm not sure when that is, he sounds like he could well emphasise at least half of that point. Obviously, the government is still seeking to reduce tariffs through a mutually beneficial trade deal. But if that doesn't work, we need a plan B. Plan B is not to go it alone. That's mad. And even if it does work, if plan A does work, it doesn't stop us doing plan B as well. Starmer still adopts the line that it's not a case of choosing between the US and the EU. What he's saying by that is, I can pursue closer ties with the EU at the same time as America. And that's right. But as I've said before, Trump could force the choice. If he does, blindingly obvious which way we go. Our trade is guaranteed to be worse off under Trump's terms, should such a choice be forced. And for the long term as well. Our trade has more potential to actually grow by working with countries whose combined economic might does actually rival America's, but are also committed to rules-based trade and mutual respect. complete no-brainer. And I'll come back to this. We know that Canada, the UK, France and Germany are talking to each other specifically about how they approach this. There's a real impetus to avoid falling prey to Trump's extortion. But many countries, in fact almost all countries, including the UK, do not want to see a trade war develop because they don't think it will work and it will just make a global recession more likely. So they're not discussing how to coordinate a retaliation. The EU leaders are doing that, but Canada and the UK are not, as Ed Davey wants, right? That's not going to work on Trump, who has had this policy in mind for decades and is not going to stop now. So it makes sense that what they're talking about is what Canada have been openly talking about, moving closer to like-minded markets to establish a new trading bloc to push the rules-based order as a better option to the protectionist tactics of Trump. And if it works, more and more countries may want to join in. Where will Trump go from there? Never mind changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico, he'll have to change the name of the entire country to United States of Billy No Mates. This is a way of challenging Trump without self-defeating escalation, a way of telling Trump, yeah, you can take your ball home, we've got another. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, please click the like button and subscribe for further content. If you'd like to support the channel further, you can click the join button for memberships. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.